Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the EuroCham webinar today. Today's webinar will be the ninth webinar in our series and will be on managing stress in times of adversity, a topic that I think everybody can empathize with at the moment. My name is Tom Heskett. I'm the Business Services Manager at EuroCham Cambodia. But today, the main content will come from motivational coach, Joey Ra. So Joey, I wonder if you just wanted to give yourself a brief introduction.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Joey Ra. I'm a certified professional coactive coach. I'm trained by the Coactive Training Institute, specializing in executive coaching and life coaching. I also run a small consultancy business specializing in executive pay. I'm Korean born, but developed in England. And I coach leaders here in Cambodia and further abroad as well. I'm a mentor at Impact Hub, and currently I'm training the first generation of Cambodian coaches. I'm trained specifically to serve this community, so I'm excited about that. I specialize in emotional work, and emotion, I believe, is where we can unlock tremendous momentum and potential. So hopefully that's going to be valuable today.
Okay, I'm sure. I'm looking forward to hearing your inputs for this particular topic then. Briefly, the structure of this talk. So we'll have a very brief introduction that will last around 2 or 3 minutes, just to talk about EuroCham's activities itself during COVID-19. We'll then go on to Joey's presentation, and at the end we'll have a brief Q&A session. So as this webinar is pre-recorded, we'll be taking questions under the YouTube link of the video. So please do submit your questions under the YouTube link, and myself or Joey will be getting back to you on that. So just to briefly introduce EuroCham, EuroCham is the largest non-Cambodian business association in Cambodia. It's supported by the European Union ICI Plus program, and we have 4 key activities. The first of those is members, organizing the type of networking events that most of you are familiar with. We have an outreach program where we promote Cambodia as an investment destination. We have an advocacy department where we seek to work with the European private sector and the government of Cambodia to improve the ease of doing business. And we also have the services department, which I run, which is our in-house consulting wing. So during COVID-19, EuroCham has been affected as every other organization in Cambodia, particularly as we're an event organizer. So events have been postponed until further notice. Most of our own staff are working remotely. We're working to disseminate COVID-19 communications, only those that have been validated by WHO and Ministry of Health. And we're engaging with the government to discuss mitigating measures for impacted sectors. At the same time, and as you may have seen in your inboxes, we're always gathering and summarizing all relevant decisions by the Royal Government of Cambodia, and those can be found on our website. And the link to the website can be found here. So just to elaborate on those, so that includes some 61 announcements by the government of Cambodia in April alone. This has been a time of a lot of change, but you can find those main government decisions on our website there, and all 61 of them have been summarized and translated from Khmer. In the future, we'll also be having 2 more webinars. The next one will be on crisis communications during COVID-19. And preceding that, we'll have the impact of COVID-19 on global supply chains. So for those of you who have joined this particular webinar, we hope you'll be interested in the topics coming up. So in short, that's it from me, the EuroCham introduction. I'll now pass you on to the content you came for, and Joey Ra.
Thank you. So today we're going to be spending the next 40 minutes or so looking at the topic of managing stress in times of adversity. So we'll dive straight into it. So we're going through something big, and we don't have to pretend. Things are difficult. So you can feel it in the air. You can feel it from those you work with, those you live with. Colleagues are more on edge, and so are you. And that's to be expected because our world has changed drastically in a very short space of time. So we often talk about VUCA, so volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous times. Now we're referring to this as VVUCA, so very volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And so as a result, we're facing many stresses. We are experiencing a lot of stress from a lot of different places. We're worried about our health and those of our loved ones, some close to us, some on the other side of the world. We're facing financial uncertainty and hardship, both at an organizational level, but also at an individual level, like with pay cuts widespread. And people are unsure about whether their jobs are safe, if they haven't lost it already. And for those of us, we're an international community, and those of us who have roots in different countries, we're not sure when we're going to be able to visit home again or see our friends again. So we're facing a very difficult time. Just looking at the workplace as well, we're facing new working conditions. So many of us are working from home, as our European colleagues are as well. And so our personal lives and our work lives have been collapsed into a very small space. We're juggling the roles of being multiple roles as well at the same time. So we're being a mother, a boss, a friend, while also looking after ourselves. And even we have great technology like Zoom, which helps us to stay connected with other people. But actually, we find that they leave you feeling tired as well afterwards. Also at work, we feel that we have to produce, and perform at the same levels as we used to before, while dealing with everything else that's going on. So it's causing a lot of stress for us. And we don't know when this is going to end. Hopefully, today we're going to look at how we manage this now. So first of all, we'll start off by looking at what stress is. So this is the stress pathway. So it's made up of 3 different bits. So number 1, we have the inputs. So these are called stresses, things that trigger this response. The second is we have a physiological response. That's we notice things in our bodies, raised heart rate, sweaty palms, and the associated emotions with it. And then finally, this results in behaviors, which, on a large level, we categorize as fight, flight, or freeze. So this pathway is normal behavior, it's not bad. So in a dangerous situation, stress signals the body to prepare to face a threat or run away from the danger into safety. And so, in these situations, you might have noticed your pulse quickens, you breathe faster, your muscles tense up, and your brain uses more oxygen and increases activity. And these are all functions that's aimed at survival in response to fear and stress. Even in non-life-threatening situations, stress can be useful to motivate you to action. For example, if you are facing an exam, it might cause you to study more. Or interview for a new job. But we also know in the same situations it can have negative effects. And that's what we're focusing on today. So we're going to break these 3 steps down and look at them individually. So the inputs and the stresses. These are things that trigger the stress pathway. So in current times, that could be financial uncertainty. It could be crowded places, even for those who aren't claustrophobic. So I get stressed out when I go outside around the Independence Monument and I see loads of people around 5 o'clock. And I'm like, what are they doing, gathering in such a crowd? Or like if you're thinking about doing an interview or public speaking. So I get stressed out from an audience. And I'm sure many of us do as well. And especially now, seeing comments on social media also could be stresses for us. So what's important to note here that there's a lot of things that can trigger stress, and not everybody shares the same stresses. Inputs are just inputs. So I might get stressed out in an interview, and the next person might not so much. Crowded places obviously don't stress out the people who are gathering in the Independence Monument, but it stresses me out. So what I want to highlight here is that inputs are just objective facts without meaning. Let's move on to the second stage, which is the physiological response. So what happens in our bodies is that when we get inputs, the stressors, something happens in our body. So this hormone called cortisol gets released. And this triggers various responses in our body, like elevated heart rate, sweaty palms, etc. And we interpret these as emotions. So we have these feelings in our bodies. And this is the point where we also think, I'm stressed. And this is all normal. And we're going to touch on this later as well and dig more into it. And the third part is the resulting behaviors. So these are the fight, flight, and freeze response. And these are behaviors associated with stress in the fear pathway. Now, stress induces these behaviors that have these characteristics, such as aggressiveness, so that's the fighting, avoidance, that's the flight, or being like lethargic and giving up, that's the freeze response. But we also exhibit behaviors as a result due to cortisol, and behaviors that are short-term focused in nature, or behaviors that are aimed at self-preservation. Due to our decreased tolerance for risk, we don't want risk, that also reduces our creativity. And also, it causes us to assume the worst and interpret the facts with fear. Now you can see why this is useful, these characteristics and behaviors, if it's in a really threatening situation. So if, for example, if you're in the savannah and you're running away from a lion, you don't care about your 5-year plan. You just want to get out of there. So the short-term focus is designed to protect you. Also, you're very much self-focused because that's what's important right now. And again, that reduced tolerance for risk will keep you safe in that moment. And interpreting with fear, there are signals that's going on, and in a high-risk situation, it's safer to assume the worst than and interpreting things with fear. So if you hear a noise behind you, thinking in a jungle, interpreting that as a potential predator will make you run away, and that will generally keep you safe. Now, how does that actually play out in our situation right now? These types of behaviors, such as short-term focus, self-preservation, reduced creativity, and interpreting with fear, leads to things like panic buying, or conspiracy theories where we're interpreting everything with fear. We're taking facts and interpreting it using a certain lens. And also just general stupidity, things as we can see in some protests in America. Now, these are some extreme examples of how cortisol, how stress behaviors present themselves in society, but also in more familiar examples of workplaces, where you can imagine stress behaviors are not good for businesses or teams. So people being more impatient, more reactive or aggressive, more tension in the air, and this is what we're talking about when we say we can feel something in the air right now. And we're less able to collaborate because we're focused on ourselves. We're focused on self-preservation. How can I keep myself safe? So we're less helpful to others. And then also we have people shutting down and not able to focus like they used to be able to focus. Now, if you think that one of the effects of the stress pathway is short-term focus and decreased creativity due to becoming more risk-averse, imagine what's going to happen to your organizations if everybody's like this, short-term focused. We're going to be firefighting all the time. And actually, what you will all know is that creativity is what's needed in this time to figure out with new solutions to the problems that we're facing as a society, organization, and ecosystem. But actually what the stress pathway is doing is it's preventing that because it's reducing creativity and it's making you focus on yourself. So we need to learn to manage, one, our internal states, and then two, learn how to manage these stressful behaviors as well. So we're going to now move on to talk about strategies on doing this. And so there's strategies in 4 large buckets. So first of all, I'm not going to waste time. I'm going to give you a quick and powerful fix that if you take away nothing else from this webinar, this will have a huge impact. We'll spend some time talking about our internal strategy. So knowing what we're experiencing, increasing our emotional intelligence, and learning how to sit with these emotions so we can create a space between the feeling of stress and the stressful behaviors. We'll mention external strategies too, so identifying what stresses you out and minimizing the stresses if possible. It's quite straightforward. And we'll touch on some general well-being strategies as well in the rest of the webinar. So yeah, let's not waste time. The big solution, the quick fix, is oxytocin. This is the vaccine that you have been looking for. So we have talked about cortisol before, right? And cortisol is the hormone that triggers the stress pathway. The effects of cortisol we talked about were short-term thinking, reduced tolerance to risk, and interpreting everything out of fear. Now, oxytocin is a hormone. It's often known, it's casually known as the cuddle hormone. And in humans and in animals, it's responsible for social bonding. It's also triggered by social bonding. And so on the slide, you have the effects of oxytocin. So you can see that these are the opposites of the cortisol pathway. And it counteracts the cortisol behaviors. It also, long-term thinking boosts creativity, assumes the best, and again, really important, it fosters, this is how we build trust with other people. And it's known to be the foundation of effective teams and general good mental wellness as well. So I just want to note here that short-term crisis thinking, so the cortisol pathway, is good and is necessary for businesses and for individuals. However, and if we get stuck in it, we're going to run ourselves and our businesses to the ground. We'll always be fighting fires, and our internal systems are going to be fried. So this is why it's so important to trigger the oxytocin pathway. So my one message to you is, if you take nothing else away, connect with people. And connect with people intimately, deeply, and not just at a surface level. Be vulnerable. Go beyond what you would normally do, because this is what's going to counteract the cortisol pathway. Find ways to create connection in various areas of your lives where you're struggling with stress. So if you're stressed at work, many of us are living with our families right now in a closed space. If you're stressed with them, find a way to bond with them, and that's going to instantly change things around.
I would just have a question on that, Joey. I see the importance of, you've just demonstrated the importance of connecting with people. But I know many on our audience today will probably be like myself and yourself, away from the family that they would normally connect with. What would be the advice you would have for during this period of social distancing to make up for that lack of connection that you would normally get through social circles? How would you do that as a foreigner living in Cambodia at the moment? Yeah,
so this is actually a personal struggle, but also a struggle that a lot of my clients come to me with. How do I get this social connection right now? And we know that, first of all, I'll say, we know that Zoom isn't perfect. We know that online connection isn't perfect. It's more draining, it takes more effort. And a lot of us have a barrier to just calling up people and connecting with people online or on the phone. However, when I've done it, maybe not a 3-hour thing, but like a 30-minute, 40-minute, 20-minute catch-up with a friend, I've suddenly felt so alive, and I no longer feel stressed in this fearful state, but actually it opens up. I feel connected to people, I feel happy, and I feel hopeful. And I started to think about possibility and how can I serve people. So it triggers all of these. So that's it. Go out of your way to try this out and connect with people online. It's not perfect, but it's what we have.
Okay, that's good advice, actually. I know that certainly for myself, I've been receiving many more calls from back home, from university friends, school friends who I haven't been in contact with for a while. So I can see and indeed I can feel the benefit of that when it happens.
And it's funny because I feel like we're both millennials. And so one of the things that is a characteristic of millennials. We're reluctant to speak on the phone. We're like texting people generally. And so this is the personal barrier that I've had to get over and reconnect with my telephone nature.
So yeah, an opportunity in some ways.
Exactly. Cool. So that's the quick and powerful fix that I promised. Connect with people. Now we're going to move on to the internal strategy. So we spoke about, first of all, knowing what you're experiencing. And I want to spend some time talking about grief. I want to name this as what we're experiencing collectively as a society and as individuals. And we're experiencing grief, and you may be surprised that I bring this up on this webinar, but we're experiencing grief on many different levels. We're grieving so many things. We're grieving, could be loss of income, or simply like loss of freedom to travel whenever we want, loss of travel plans, which is huge for a lot of people, to be honest. Before I used to think, if I wanted, in a day I could be anywhere in the world. Now that's been taken away. And even though that's a luxury that I've lost, I've had to learn to grieve it. Loss of connection, being able to connect with people physically, and loss of business plans. Overnight, my business strategy for the year went out the window. And then what we do is we go through grief. And one of the things I want to say is that we try to skip often to acceptance of meaning. This is on the slide, is the grief cycle as outlined by Kubler-Ross and David Kessler, the experts in grief. And most of us think that we can just skip straight to accepting the situation and finding meaning in all of this. But actually, research has shown that this isn't possible. We have to go through the stages in some form or another. And so we're not only experiencing grief for what we've actually lost, but in addition, there's something called anticipated grief. So we're also grieving what we think we might lose, and which is, a big thing that we're facing in this uncertain environment. There's a lot of anticipatory grief. We don't know what we might lose in the future. And what's really important about grief is that it hurts us, and it recycles over and over again until we process it. So trying to skip to acceptance and meaning doesn't work. We need to sit with it. We need to be with it. And this is particularly relevant in Cambodian society, maybe also in companies. There's a lot of research in terms of work in traumatized societies, especially in Cambodia too, where we talk about intergenerational grief. So it's bad here in Cambodia, and it's also used to explain the high rates of domestic and sexual violence in Cambodia, the fact that there is trauma that is present in society, and that people haven't grieved over it. There's a quote, "If we don't transform pain, we're destined to transmit it." Now, this may all seem like, what are you talking about? But maybe I'll give you a more relatable example. So in a workplace context, let's say the boss is feeling anxious because they're grieving, right? We're going through something, we call it stress, and ends up snapping at his subordinate. The subordinate is shocked and spends the day obsessing over the interaction and ends up disliking the boss and feeling unappreciated. Now, he complains to the colleague about it over lunchtime, and one colleague thinks they're too sensitive, and more friction occurs between the colleagues. But another colleague ends up also disliking the boss and gives negative energy towards the boss for the rest of the day. Now the boss feels unloved now because no one supports him, and how hard is it to try and lead in these difficult times when he gets no support? And he gets angry at the situation and then sad, takes it home maybe, and that cycle continues. Performance for everybody falls, adding more stress, and the cycle continues. So what I give that example to highlight the fact that denial and avoidance of trauma and emotions and stress, especially in Cambodia, I see this widespread in Asia, but also in workplaces where there generally isn't a place for emotion. We try to deny the first 4 stages of this cycle and force ourselves and others to go straight to acceptance. You can see the resulting impact of this, and the negative impact is going to be huge. So we need to learn to sit with it and move through it and transform it. And that starts with recognizing that we are, first of all, in this cycle, recognizing where we are in this cycle, and learn how to process it, which is the next part of of the webinar. And I just want to say here that you can't just tell yourself, don't be stressed, it's stupid, or don't be sad, it's stupid. What's the point of being stressed? What's the point of being sad? Because, well, one, it controls you when it's not looked at. And then you're also stressing about being stressed, which is just a negative feedback loop.
Just on this one, I wanted to ask, are there benefits from an employer or manager's point of view to being more open with their staff? Would you, as a manager, as a coach, would you advocate for that approach, or do you think it's there is a time and place for to be open with your staff?
I would say, especially in these times, it's so crucial to be open with staff, because being vulnerable fosters trust, and trust is the foundation of an effective team. And so I've been very open with my employees about how I'm feeling. Sometimes I tell them, actually, I don't really feel like working today. I'm not sure how much I'll get done. I'm feeling a lot of tension. I'm feeling stressed out. I'm going to take a few hours to take a nap.
That certainly goes against the stereotype that you hear of what the qualities that a manager perhaps should, or certainly historically a manager should show. So this is interesting.
Yeah, because to be honest, I feel these things, and if I pretended like I didn't, imagine what the effect would be like on my employee. Here is my boss being all perfect and smashing out the park still, even in these times, and I'm feeling really bad as an employee. Because why can't I be like that? So it's setting up, it's like what you see in social media, on Instagram, like people seeing this perfect image, which is not real. We pretend like we don't have emotion, we pretend that we don't struggle. That's not real. And people know it. And so that decreases trust and it decreases safety.
Okay, so that's interesting. So the boss shouldn't be or the manager shouldn't be exhibiting the characteristics for staff members to aspire to. Or they should, but they should also.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So it's not an either or, it's a both and. Okay. So as a leader, I feel this thing, and I'm in this hole right now, and I also provide the vision for where we're going together.
Okay.
But that comes through accepting the fact that, I am in anger right now. I'm feeling anger or I'm feeling depressed. But I know we're moving towards acceptance and meaning. So this is the pathway, and here is where I am, and here's where we're going.
Okay, interesting. I know that will certainly be the case for many of our listeners today, where business plans may not have gone the way that they wanted to this year.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, so just a reminder of this beautiful quote that I love. If pain is not transformed, it is transmitted. So if you're feeling pain because of the stresses, if you're feeling stressed, if you don't transform it, it's going to be passed on to those around you. So how do we transform emotions? That's the question, right? How do we transform stress? How do we transform this feeling in our bodies if we don't want to transmit it? Now, you might be surprised when I say this, because it might seem really difficult to do, but actually, it happens very naturally in our bodies, this transformation of emotion, and it happens much quicker than we think. So if we learn how to be with it, and if we don't recycle it by either ignoring it or actively replaying the stresses in our surroundings or in our minds, research shows that emotions pass and transform within 45 seconds.
Okay, that is quicker than I expected.
Quicker than I expected too. And the more I work with emotions and the more I help clients sit with emotions, the more this is shown to be true. People are afraid of going into emotions and sitting with the negative feeling because they're afraid that they're never going to be able to come out. That it's not going to change. What's the point of wasting time dwelling on it? But there's a difference between being with an emotion and ruminating. And ruminating is like recycling the thought in our heads. I'm so stressed out, I'm so stressed out, I'm so stressed out. What am I going to do about money? What am I going to do about money? What am I going to do about money? That is not helpful, and the emotion's not going to pass if you keep doing that. And there is learning how to deal with it. So we're going to talk about how we do that. And this is the reason why some people cope with stress more effectively and recover from stressful events more quickly than others. And there's a term for this, it's called emotional intelligence, and there's a lot of research on this. So if you're interested, and if you find this helpful, go out there and research on it, learn more about it. So how to sit with your emotions is what we're going to look at. So first of all, be compassionate to yourself. Don't judge yourself for having these emotions. It's okay to be sad, angry, afraid, envious, delusion. Most of the time we avoid the emotion and we attach a negative association to this emotion because they lead to bad behaviors. I feel sad, therefore I'm going to binge drink and then pass out, and tomorrow I'll be hungover, so it's bad. Or I'm angry, so I'm going to hit someone. So hitting someone is a bad behavior, and we don't want that. But being angry isn't bad, it's just a feeling. And so be compassionate with yourself. We can't control how we feel. We're human. To feel is what we do. When we deny ourselves our emotions, we deny humanity. And judging ourselves for feeling something will just make it worse. It's what Mark Manson, the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, very popular book out there, it's great, calls the feedback loop from hell. So we feel bad about feeling bad, and the cycle continues. So first of all, be compassionate. Don't judge yourself. Now second is to name the emotion that you're feeling. And so most of us are not good at this. Not in Cambodian culture, from what I understand, not in Korean culture, and definitely not in England. Our emotional literacy, our emotional vocabulary is quite limited. So go beyond the basic labels of happy, sad, afraid, angry. Instead, be very specific. For example, your anger could be actually more let down, or your anger could be disrespected. And why is this important? It's because if you're angry, there's not much things you can do with it. There's not many things that you can do with anger. But if you know what's behind it, if you feel let down, then that naturally leads to more insight, more learning, and therefore more action. So there's a lot of helpful charts on the internet that helps to do this. I don't think there's one in Khmer. I think it'd be really good if there was one in Khmer. So Google emotion wheel. And you can see on the slide that there's a whole range of labels to the emotions. And so learn to identify exactly what we're dealing with, because it opens up new information and realization. The next step is to observe the emotion. And I put in brackets physically. So this is going to sound really weird to you guys, I understand. And just bear with me here. So ask the questions, following questions. Where do you feel the emotion in your body? So right now, we're all feeling an emotion as we listen to this. It might be like incredulous, curious, doubt. Now, where do you feel that in your body? Locate it. Is it in your head? Is it in your chest? Ask, and what does it feel like? Is that sensation, is it like a gas? Is it a liquid? What's the temperature? What's the color? What does it look like? And so what we're doing now is we are learning to be physically intelligent. By observing the emotion in this way, what you do is, first of all, you separate it from your identity. So you don't identify with the emotion. So you create some distance between yourself and the emotion. So you're less likely to feel overwhelmed by the emotion. That's the first step. That's the first reason. And the second reason is that our mind is what recycles emotion, is what gives meaning to these physical sensations. And our mind comes with traps and stories and things that are in our heads. So I told you earlier that emotion lasts only about 90 seconds in our bodies before transforming into something else. And that's true. But our mind is, if we go to our mind and we try to analyze it, why am I feeling angry? Why am I feeling disrespected? All of these things, then you can end up recycling the emotion. So just focusing on the bodily sensation and learning to sit with that bodily sensation and the discomfort. So it's uncomfortable identifying stress in your body or anger in your body. But if you just sit with it, you'll get something out of it. So I encourage you to try this. If you don't believe, just try this at home for 90 seconds, just checking in your body. this is also one of the benefits of mindfulness and meditation practices, by learning to be calm and be present.
So it's, just to be clear, so it's not looking at why you feel this way, it's just looking at objectively how it makes you feel.
Exactly.
Or objectively looking at the feeling itself.
Yeah. So I don't want to deny the importance of asking why, because later on we talk about the external, managing external. So why do I feel triggered? Let's minimize those triggers. That's the easy solution, right?
Yes, yeah, that's the way that traditionally I would,
that's what we think. And that's minimizing one trigger, preventing one trigger from stressing you out. What this does, it increases your capacity to be in a difficult situation. So it increases your capacity for stress. I told you that some people manage stress better than others. It's because they can sit with these emotions and not react based on it. It's creating distance from feeling this feeling in your body and the automatic reaction of fight, flight, or freeze by just sitting with it and identifying it in your body. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Okay.
In a strange way, it makes sense.
In a strange way. This is not the way I've thought about this before, so it's interesting.
Yeah. And so just, once you observe it, just sit with the emotion without judging yourself for feeling it, without being afraid that you're going to exhibit bad behaviors. Just sit with the anger. Don't punch someone, just sit with it, identify where it is, and see what happens. Because often you'll find that it shifts after you sit with it for a while. And as I said, sometimes it's just best to experience it without even asking questions like, why am I feeling it? Which involves your brain. And it's a hard question to answer sometimes. Why am I feeling this way? Sometimes it's easy, it's because my boss shouted at me. But other times it's a general anxiety that we feel and we don't know why. And so once you've experienced the emotion and something shifts, you'll feel a change that happens. So the feeling in your body will change. And then you can ask yourself, what do you want to do now? Because you'll be in a different state. Do I still want to punch him or go and do something else?
Hopefully the response is never to punch somebody.
Hopefully. So, and this is, if you ever find yourself becoming overwhelmed, because I know this is a big fear in people, of dealing with emotion, sitting with emotion. And when this happens, if you find yourself being overwhelmed, that's probably because your head will be trying to take control and get you worrying about the past or the future. Like, oh, what am I going to do with this? Or am I going to be able to get out of this sensation? And when that happens, just bring yourself back into the present moment, to your surroundings, again to your body. But if that's not working, just do simple things like paying attention to your breathing. Just observe how you're breathing naturally. No need to force yourself to take deep breaths. Just notice. Another helpful thing is to just identify, if you find yourself getting overwhelmed, just find 5 things in the room and just focus on that. Describe it. Oh, there's a black chair behind us. What's like an office chair? What would it feel like? And again, that's trying to, if you ever find yourself getting overwhelmed, that's a helpful technique to bring yourself back.
So promoting mindfulness.
Exactly. And exactly. And finally, if you have trouble doing this on your own, reach out to a trained professional to help. You shouldn't really need it. And you can do this at home yourself, is what I'm trying to say. And if you are particularly not emotionally literate and you feel like this is going to be helpful, reach out. And I know that there's not thousands of trained professionals in Cambodia. However, there are still some. And there are many who are willing to support people who are going through a difficult time right now. People doing free seminars and stuff like that. So if you're financially not able, if you're worried about the money, lots of people are actually providing this free of charge or at reduced cost. I'm also training coaches with a strong focus on equipping them to work with clients' emotions, Cambodian coaches, so they'll be available as well. So that is, to recap, that's how to sit with these emotions. So one, first of all, just be compassionate to yourself. Two, name the emotion that you're feeling. Three, observe the emotion. And that's where do you feel it in your body. And just sit with the emotion. If you find yourself becoming overwhelmed, bring yourself back to the present moment. And if you're really struggling with this, reach out to a trained professional to help. And I wrote a helpful blog on this on my website, which recaps all of the things we talked through and provides some additional information. And now we're going to quickly, only very quickly, go through the external factors, because actually what we've been through so far, this is the real key. This is increasing your emotional range and intelligence to be able to be with this. But also external things are important because they're quite effective. So we're going to quickly go over some external tips. And this might be echoing a lot of what you know already, so we'll be speedy. So first of all, limit your media intake. It's good to be informed, but ask how much it helps you and those around you. I've seen it in a lot of people these days. They're getting overwhelmed because they're reading so much news and they're getting overwhelmed by everything that's going around. And that's not helpful. Read the Eurochamp summaries instead. To spring clean your social media connections. So I put this in because a lot of people are getting triggered by a lot of things that they're reading on social media. So I found myself getting triggered a lot in the beginning of the crisis. People not taking seriously, or people posting conspiracy theories. That used to stress me out. So if you have a friend that stresses you out, just unfollow them. Don't have to unfriend them. Rather, instead, foster your connection with reliable, trustworthy friends and share helpful advice and stories about how people are helping each other during this period and staying safe. Read Eurochamp's WHO and MOH confirmed advice as well. Get your information from reliable sources instead. Third of all, linked to that, be informed. Be informed by following credible advice. Again, don't overwhelm yourself. Be informed also about the healthy habits, such as washing hands, hygiene practices, physical distancing. So these are things to keep you physically safe. Also things like getting regular exercise and how to do that, how to stay physically fit and mentally fit. Four, create structures that serve your mental and emotional health. So without giving you a whole list, find a way to keep active, sleep at a regular time, and eat healthily at a regular time, not when you feel hungry. This is a key, especially when we're going through a stressful situation. Our appetites drop. So just eat when you should, not when you want to. Get enough sleep, honestly. You'll feel a lot better after sleep. And I'm just going to move on because a lot of information is out there already. Find what works for you and create a structure around that. And linked to that is having routines. So there are experts talking of dangers of burnout at home for a lot of people due to what's called decision fatigue. We're having to make so many more decisions about everything, more than we needed to before. Even simple things such as like going and buying groceries. There's so many things to think about. How often should I go buy groceries? If I get it delivered, should I wash my hands before touching the bags or after touching the bags, after putting things away? Do I clean each fruit one by one? So we're making all these decisions that we never had to make before. So on that, I'd say just know that this will settle eventually and have routines that you just fall into. Create a safe routine and just stick to it.
I think that one's especially important going into remote working because I know that many people won't have had that discipline to complete the work during the outside of your normal work environment. When you have your set lunch, when you have your set, now I pick up my laptop and I go home.
Yeah.
So, I think it's an important one.
That's a much better example. Yeah. So now we have the freedom to schedule our day however we want, to a large extent, and that's more decisions. So if you create a routine, a structure, then you don't have to decide, you just follow it. Number 6, again, this is linked to the oxytocin. Call up a friend who lifts you up and put in a good mood. So this is me and a good friend of mine. Just sharing about our experience, sharing about inspiring stories that we're hearing in this crisis. And that gives me such an oxytocin boost. And that fills me with hope and ideas rather than fear and shutting down. My friend created that poster, by the way, not me. Now 7, this is really important, and I want to highlight it. Focus on what you can control. So we can look at this from 2 perspectives, one as a victim and one as a person who's trying to help. So we feel like there's so many things that we can't control. Focus on the ones that you can, because and just work on those. That's going to help. But also, on the other hand, many of us feel called to help others during this time, during this pandemic. I've been blown away by the number of people stepping up, looking to help. But I've also seen people like on the verge of burnout and breakdown and stressing about all the help that the world needs. We can't help everyone. So instead, I would just say, what is 1 or 2 things? Who are 1 or 2 people or 1 or 2 communities that you can help? What are 1 or 2 projects that you can get involved with? And so early on in the pandemic, there was this graph showing the importance of social distancing, physical distancing, because 1 person spreads it to 2 people, and those 2 becomes 4 becomes, it's exponential. Now imagine if we start a kindness pandemic. If each of us just focus on helping 2 people, then we're going to have a kindness pandemic on our hands. And actually, this is going to go global. So we don't have to feel like we have to solve everything. Just focus on 1 or 2 things, and the positive impact will continue being paid forward. And the final thing is, it's an echo of the first one, is be compassionate with yourself. So you don't need to do that online course. You don't need to finish that book. You don't need to be your best self right now. And you don't need to be performing at your best right now. Get rid of the shoulds and woulds and needs tos. Instead, ask yourself what you want to do when you're in this period. Then we get rid of that expectation, which causes more stress. So just to recap on this section, we have these slides here to remind you, and again, these are all repeated on my website, jerryrao.com. In the blog section, there's an article that takes you through these again. And I want to leave you with some final words. So we covered a lot of things today, and I'd say, be kind to yourself, connect with others, because that's what's going to provide the oxytocin hit that's going to counteract the stress pathway. Be human and experience emotions, because learning to do that and learning to sit with it, this is what's going to increase your capacity to manage difficult emotions during this time. And you'll figure out how to minimize the stresses yourself. Cool. Thank you. And I think we're going to have a short period for questions and answers.
Yes, indeed. So Joey, thank you very much for that presentation. I feel like I've been coached a little myself, actually. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on this. So the next section will be a Q&A, but for those of you who would like to ask questions later on, please feel free to post a comment under the YouTube link, the YouTube video, and Joey will be able to get back to you with that response as well. So you do have the opportunity to ask Joey questions yourself. But for my own questions, Joey, my first one would be, see, these are very challenging times for managers and staff, businesses alike. So my first question would be, what tips would you give to managers during this time to ensure their own staff stress levels are lowered and that morale remains high in the face of, or at least as high as it could be, in the face of not so promising news?
I'd echo what I mentioned before about the need to build trust and build the culture of trust, because we don't want people and a culture of trust and safety. Trust that we got each other, that we're supportive of each other. As an employer, that my employee, I've got you, we're in this together. And how to build that trust is by being open and vulnerable about what you're going through, so that your employees feel like they can be honest about what they're going through, so that you can support them. Because often employees will just keep it to themselves because, one, they should, is my problems, but also I don't want to burden the boss, so I have to be the small employee. So be open, so you can provide, you're giving permission by your example. Because you can't help your employees if you don't know what they're going through. And then the second is the very important part, which is you need to provide a vision for going forward. And one of the important things is that, in the context of where we are, how has life changed, and what does that mean for our business and our team, and where are we going? So we need to provide that future as well. Being focused, and that only happens when you sit with where you are now. What does that mean for us? Before we can move on to think about the vision. But those two need to be held hand in hand.
Okay, so really encouraging trust and openness, but also providing the vision of where we're going. That would be the role of the manager in this situation, or the business owner.
Yeah, and I highlight the first bit because most of the leaders are very good at providing vision. That's why they're leaders already.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so my next question that would then be essentially to do with expectation setting during COVID-19. And on the screen, I share a post that I saw on your own Facebook feed about from the NHS about how they're managing it. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on how should a manager, how should an employee manage the expectations of their workplace at a time when really it's very difficult to have the same level of output right now as it would have been before coronavirus came into the country.
Yeah, so it's a big pressure that we're facing, like feeling like we have to perform like we were doing before. But actually, we are in a different situation. So I love the distinction that the NHS provided. Like, you're not working from home. You are at home during a crisis, trying to work. And that's actually what's going on. This is the new normal that we're facing, which could potentially last a while. Now we can have strategies that we put in place to maximize our happiness and our productivity and effectiveness and all that. And it's going to be a bit of a mess as we go there. So it's just being honest with the situation. And now there are expectations that leaders set on themselves. They're like, I need to be the kind of leader that creates a structure or a culture that allows employees to perform like they were before. That's pressure that they're putting on themselves, and then just passing that on to their employees, the shoulds and needs tos.
Yes, I mean, I've certainly seen that, if anything, reporting requirements have increased during this time because of that pressure to maintain levels of productivity. So,
reporting requirements meaning reporting how you're doing, what you're doing?
Yes, weekly outputs, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even to a higher extent than would have been done before.
Yeah. And again, there is trust, and you need to be mindful of the tone that it sets and the tone that you provide the weekly output reports on. Because one is, if there's any possibility of like shame or people feeling like I'll be judged for my weekly output, I need to produce this, like otherwise, my job's at risk, or people are going to think lesser of me, then that's not the right way to use it. Weekly outputs are good just to measure how we're doing and effectiveness of working practices. It's good to know, but the culture of safety and trust is very crucial for this to work.
Okay. So again, building that culture and setting expectations within the workplace, it seems. Okay, so my next question then would be to do with stress management in general. I've heard that stressful situations are sometimes the situations that you learn from the most. So I guess the question would be, how can the average person, not even the average person, how can anybody change a stressful situation from feeling like, as you mentioned, they're being chased by a predator in the savannah, to having a more positive attitude towards it as seeing it more as a learning opportunity?
Yeah. I'm going to bring you back to two things. So there's two ways to look at it, which is the same thing really. One is the degree cycle. So what you're talking about here is finding meaning through all of this. So we might look back on this period, and a lot of us are in the meaning stage. But like, this is a time for us to really, it's a big pause where we can reflect on what we really want out of life. Or it's been a learning opportunity and we've grown so much from it. That's deriving meaning from a stressful situation, a painful situation. But we only get there because we sat with the pain. And so the steps of learning to sit with the emotions and learning to sit in the difficulty, that is going to open up the possibility for you to take a new perspective on things. So if you've been through a difficult situation and someone goes, oh, look on the bright side of it, how do you respond? You're like, oh, go, swear word off. I'm not ready for that. I just want to feel bad right now. I'm angry. And so we don't want to deny the situation, accept it, and then we can derive a different perspective that might be more helpful.
Okay. Is it one way to do it then? Okay. So I think there will be some businesses and some people that will be going through very stressful times at the moment. It might not be a case of just their revenue has been hit. They may have actually lost their jobs.
Yeah.
I suppose as a coach, or from what you've seen, is there any advice you could give those people while we're on the webinar at the moment? It's a very difficult question.
It's a difficult question. I mean, so one is the practical aspect, which is ask for help. If you don't ask, people can't help you. And there are a lot of people who are willing to help in a situation. So sometimes we feel a reluctance to ask when we're in a bad situation. So that's one practical way. I mean, to be honest, it's a really difficult situation when you're in that, when you lose your job, when you're financially insecure. Yeah, that's tough. And it's okay to be sad about it, to be angry about it, to be upset about it. And reach out to me, reach out to some other trained professionals who can hold you in that anger, hold you in that emotion that you're going through, so that you can process it, transform it, and look to where you're going to go next.
Okay. So no real easy answer, but again, it seems opening up is and finding those connections are the way to at least cope as best as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to pretend like it's not going to be tough. It is. Yeah.
Okay then.
And I'd say that actually the coaches that I'm training right now, a large number of them lost their jobs, and now they've been trained by me to find a new purpose in their lives.
Okay, interesting.
But this was a process.
Okay, so it's, yes, I guess all bad things can lead to better opportunities in the future.
Yeah, without denying the seriousness of the bad thing, yeah.
Okay. All right, well, I know a webinar on stress management it's easy to talk about stress is itself not a happy topic. So just as my final question for this webinar, as we draw to an end, I noticed in your talk you mentioned finding those people who can give you that lift and give you that inspirational lift, I suppose.
Yeah.
So my question for you, and for the benefit of everyone on the audience, would be, could you give us an example of one of those inspirational lifts you've had, or an inspirational story you've seen recently? Hopefully that can boost all of our spirits during this time.
Yeah, sure. So this person at my co-working space, it's part of, a business network. And I just found that they launched an initiative where they collected money to buy food and supplies to help the most disadvantaged. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. You just took this, and this friend has just closed down a business because of in the tourism sector. But she was focusing on helping someone in this time. And I was like, blown away. Really? You're focusing on the people at this time? And that just lit me up so much. And also, I'm getting a lot of requests for coaching, and I can't coach everybody. So I have a whole network of coaches that I know And I reached out to them, hey, look, so I have these people coming to me for coaching, but I can't coach all of them. And they don't have the money to pay right now because they've all lost their jobs. And I've been blown away by their offers to coach them at a very nominal cost or free. And these are so many people out there. If you look for examples of people serving others or looking for ways to help other people in this moment, and we are creating a collective oxytocin pandemic, not just about self-preservation, but about supporting each other.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've certainly seen the same in BBC News. Okay, well, I guess on that note, then, I guess I hope that at least alongside the one pandemic we're facing at the moment, we also do indeed get to enjoy that kindness pandemic as well that you're talking about. So,
yeah.
Joey, I just wanted to say thank you very much for coming to the Eurochamp office today and sharing your thoughts on this. I really hope to everybody listening, this has been beneficial. As before, if you do have any questions, please post them under the YouTube link, and I'm sure Joey will be very happy to answer them. So Joey, thank you very much.
No, thanks for having me. It's been great.
Yeah, very welcome. And participants, thank you very much for joining. We hope to see you at the next Eurochamp webinar. Goodbye from Eurochamp.